Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoy life stories that touch the heart, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. I always love reading your comments, especially when you tell me which city or country you're listening from. Now, settle in for a story that will stay with you long after it ends. It was New Year's Eve. I'm Eleanor, and at 78 years old, I thought I knew my place in this world. How wrong I was. Snow was falling gently outside my kitchen window. Each flake landed softly on the pine branches, on the old shed roof, on the garden beds I'd tended all summer long. My house stood in peaceful silence. The kind of silence that comes after decades of living, breathing, existing in the same four walls. I was alone, and in my quiet moments, that wasn't punishment. It was blessing. This house, my late husband Thomas and I built it board by board, brick by brick. We poured our dreams into every corner, every creaking floorboard, every window frame. Thomas had been gone for 15 years now, but his spirit lived in these walls. The house knew me. It responded to my touch, creaked hello when I walked through the hallway, hummed contentedly when I lit the fireplace. But tonight, the silence would shatter. My family was coming. My son Richard, 55 years old but still acting like the world owed him everything. His wife Patricia, sharp-tongued and entitled. Their daughter Sophie, my 17-year-old granddaughter who was the only light in their darkness. Plus a dozen relatives and friends. 16 people in total. I'd been cooking for days. The turkey was golden brown in the oven, stuffing bubbling alongside it. Homemade rolls cooled on wire racks. My famous apple pie sat waiting on the counter. The dining table groaned under my best china, the tablecloth I'd embroidered as a young bride spread carefully beneath. Every stitch told a story. Every pattern held a memory. As I worked, a bitter thought crept in. My life had split into two parts. One was mine, quiet, peaceful, meaningful. The other belonged to them. Weekend visits and holidays filled with their loud voices, their demands disguised as requests, their mess left behind for me to clean after they returned to the city. A week ago, I'd accidentally overheard Patricia on the phone. I'd stepped outside for firewood when her voice drifted from the porch. "Where else would we go for New Year's?" she was saying, cigarette dangling from her lips. "The old woman has everything ready. It's like a free hotel, but with home cooking." The old woman. Not Mom. Not Eleanor. Just, the old woman. Those words sliced through me like ice water. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because this was all for Sophie, wasn't it? My granddaughter who always hugged me first when she arrived, who remembered my birthday when her parents forgot. Then they arrived. Car doors slamming. Cold air rushing into my warm house. Chaos replacing peace. "Mom, where are you?" Richard's voice boomed. "Come help with the bags." "Eleanor, do you have extra slippers?" Patricia commanded without even looking at me. "These boots are killing my feet." No one hugged me. No one asked how I was. I was simply moved aside like furniture blocking their path. I retreated to my kitchen, my sanctuary, my fortress. But even there, their voices invaded. Loud laughter, arguments about music, complaints about the drive. I carried dish after dish to the table. Turkey, sides, desserts. I poured drinks, cleared plates, smiled when expected. I was the hostess of my own home, but I felt like hired help. They raised toasts to health, success, the new year. Their glasses clinked above my hand-embroidered tablecloth while I sat invisible at the head of my own table. I was background noise to their celebration. After several rounds of champagne, Richard stood up with a theatrical clap. "Attention everyone. Time for presents." Patricia pulled wrapped boxes from bags, distributing gifts. Sweaters, perfume, gift cards. Then Richard approached me with something long and awkwardly wrapped. He paused, making sure all 16 people were watching. "This," he announced with a smirk, "is our special gift for Mom. For the lady of the house." He handed me the package. It was light, almost weightless. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a mop. The cheapest kind you'd find at a dollar store. Bright blue plastic handle, dingy white strings at the end. The room fell silent for exactly one heartbeat. Then Richard's voice boomed across the entire house, "There you go, Mom. So you don't forget your place." He laughed. Loud, self-satisfied, cruel. Patricia shrieked with delight, covering her mouth with fake shock. Some cousins chuckled awkwardly. Others looked away, embarrassed. Only Sophie, my sweet granddaughter, stared at her father with horror. Her face went white as snow. The shame in her eyes was so deep, so cutting, that for a moment I thought she might be the one who'd been slapped across the face. In that moment, everything changed. The laughter around the table became muffled, distant, like sounds heard underwater. The warmth from the fireplace that had been warming my back all evening suddenly vanished. Cold, bone-deep, grave cold, spread through my chest. They say hearts break from pain. Mine didn't break. It froze solid. Became a stone of ice in my chest. And in that frozen silence, something clicked. Like a switch being flipped in an old electrical box. The light I'd kept burning for them all these years, the light of my love, my patience, my hope, went out forever. I looked up from the mop at my son's grinning face. He was waiting for my reaction. Expecting me to be embarrassed, maybe hurt, then play along with his joke. Instead, I smiled. Slow and cold. "Thank you, Richard," I said quietly. My voice was steady, almost indifferent. "How thoughtful." I stood, picked up that plastic mop, and walked calmly across the room. My movements were unhurried, elegant even. I placed the mop against the wall in the corner and returned to my seat. No one was laughing anymore. The party continued, but it had changed for me. I moved among them like a ghost in my own home. Someone held out an empty glass, I filled it. Someone reached for a dish, I passed it. My body knew the routine, trained by decades of servitude. But my mind was elsewhere, traveling through years of memory. All those times I'd emptied my savings account to help Richard. 3 years ago, when he needed car repairs and I gave him nearly everything I had. That winter I wore my old coat because there wasn't money left for a new one. All those holidays when I cooked for days, cleaned for hours, and received nothing but expectations of more. The mop wasn't an insult. It was a diagnosis. A brutally honest assessment of what I'd become to them. I wasn't their mother, grandmother, or family matriarch anymore. I was a function. An appliance. The old woman who always had everything ready. I remembered my Thomas suddenly. The day we finished building this house, he brought home a tiny cedar sapling. We planted it by the front gate. "Look at this house, Eleanor," he'd said, wiping dirt from his hands and pulling me close. "Look at that little tree. This is your castle. Yours. Never let anyone make you a servant in your own kingdom." That cedar tree now towered over our property, 40 feet tall and magnificent. And I had let them turn my castle into a free hotel. Turned myself into their unpaid staff. I looked around the table with new eyes. Patricia was showing off an expensive cashmere sweater to her friend. Richard was boasting about his new fishing equipment. I knew exactly how much that sweater and fishing gear cost. $40,000 combined. Every month, on the 5th, I walked to the bank in town. I withdrew 40,000 from my account, the one that received my widow's pension from Thomas's military service, plus my life savings, and transferred it to Richard's card. He called it helping with expenses. Said I didn't need much at my age. They thought they were getting pocket change. They had no idea that money was their entire comfortable lifestyle. Their car payments. Their vacations. Patricia's designer clothes and Richard's hobbies. I lived on what remained. Modestly, carefully, like I always had. This revelation didn't hurt anymore. It simply added another cold, polished stone to the foundation of my new determination. Inside me, there was no anger. Anger burns hot. Everything in me had frozen solid. Years of swallowed insults, ignored sacrifices, and unnoticed work, it all crystallized into one perfect, diamond-hard resolve. That's when I caught Sophie's eye. She sat across from me, not eating or drinking, just watching. In her 17-year-old eyes, I saw everything. Not pity, which would have been humiliating. Something deeper, burning shame for her parents and pure, righteous outrage. She was silently apologizing for their blindness, their cruelty. That look was the final piece. It confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. I was seeing clearly for the first time in years. Thank you, sweetheart. You understand everything. The old grandfather clock in the corner chimed 11:30. Guests began talking about the president's speech, checking if the champagne was properly chilled. They were preparing for midnight. I watched the second hand move with mechanical precision. Each tick echoed in my head like a hammer on an anvil. Tick. Another second of my old life ending. Tick. Another step toward my new beginning. When the television began broadcasting the countdown from Times Square, everyone jumped up with champagne glasses and fake smiles. I remained seated. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. I slowly picked up my untouched champagne flute. The cold glass burned my fingers. 7, 6, 5. I felt my spine straightening with each number. My shoulders pulling back. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The room exploded with shouts and cheers. In that chaos, I stood up slowly, gracefully. My back was perfectly straight. My chin lifted with dignity. Their party was over. My new year was beginning. When the noise died down, Richard turned to me, still glowing with alcohol and arrogance. Now friends, he gestured grandly around the table like a general addressing his troops, let's hear from our matriarch. Mom, you're toast. He winked at me, still not noticing anything different. To him, I was part of the furniture, part of the ritual. The old mother who would say something sweet and sentimental so they could continue celebrating. I raised my glass higher. The room fell silent. All 16 people turned toward me, waiting. Happy New Year to you all, I said clearly. My voice didn't waver. It filled the entire room effortlessly, reaching every corner, ensuring every person heard every word. I've decided to begin this year with some important changes in my life. I paused, letting the words settle. Polite curiosity appeared on their faces. My first New Year's resolution concerns my financial health. I looked directly at Richard. Those monthly transfers I've been sending you, son, they stopped today. I'm sure you and Patricia will manage just fine. The smile didn't just disappear from Richard's face. It shattered, leaving behind an ugly, confused grimace. He blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. Patricia's mouth fell open. Her face stretched with shock. But I wasn't finished. My second resolution, I continued in the same calm voice, my eyes finding that ridiculous mop in the corner, is to relieve myself of an impossible burden. This house and property have become too much for me to maintain alone at my age. Here I lied smoothly, though in my voice there wasn't a trace of doubt. So I've been talking with a real estate developer. They're very interested in this land. The offer is quite generous. I've decided to accept. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I'll be moving to a small apartment in town, closer to medical facilities. As for all of you, I looked directly at Richard and Patricia. You have exactly 2 weeks to remove any personal belongings you want to keep. The silence was so complete I could hear snow falling outside the windows. Then Patricia's scream shattered it. You can't. How can you sell? What about my flower garden? I spent 3 years planting those bulbs. Richard, tell her she can't do this. She grabbed my son's sleeve desperately. Richard stared at me with wild, panicked eyes. Mom, what are you saying? Are you losing your mind? What about your promise to Dad? You promised him you'd keep this house in the family, for me. This is our family legacy. His voice cracked with hysteria. The guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. The party was dead. A family fight was rising from its ashes. Looking at his panic-stricken face, at Patricia's eyes filled with horror, not at losing a family legacy, but at losing their free vacation house, I felt satisfaction. Cold, pure satisfaction like ice water on a hot day. I calmly raised my champagne glass and took a small sip. The bubbles danced pleasantly on my tongue. You were absolutely right tonight, Richard, I said, setting down the glass. It's very important to know your place. Another pause, letting him absorb my words. This house is my property. This land is my land. The money in my account is my money. So my place is no longer here at your service. My place is wherever I choose it to be. I set my glass down firmly. This discussion is over. Without looking at anyone else, I turned and walked slowly to my bedroom on the first floor. Behind me, I heard panicked whispers, Patricia's continued shrieks, Richard's confused stammering. I closed my door and sat on my bed. Only then did I notice my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from liberation. I had done it. I had said it. The stone I'd carried in my chest for so many years had cracked, and through that crack, freedom was finally seeping in. Their party was over. Mine was just beginning. I don't know how long I sat in the quiet of my room. Outside my door, chaos reigned. First came shouting, then pleading. Richard pounded on my door. Mom, please. Let's talk. You don't mean this. Mom, what are you doing to us? I didn't answer. I just sat and listened to their world falling apart. The guests left quickly, awkwardly. No one wanted to witness a family breakdown. The party that had started so loudly ended in shameful flight. Soon I heard them packing. Not the 2-week packing I'd mentioned, everything. The sounds were angry, rushed. Cabinet doors slamming, things crashing to the floor. I caught pieces of their argument. Patricia hissing at Richard, "This is your fault with that stupid mop. You just had to push it too far. Now we'll have to live on just your salary." Richard snapping back, "You're the one who gave me the idea. You said she needed to be put in her place." Their fighting meant nothing to me now except disgusted exhaustion. A few hours later, the house went quiet. The front door slammed one final time. Tires crunched on snow as they drove away. They were gone. I emerged from my room. The dining room was a disaster. Half-eaten food, dirty plates, scattered napkins. Tinsel on the floor. And in the corner, like a monument to their stupidity, stood that bright blue mop. I looked at it and smiled, really smiled, for the first time all evening. I didn't clean up. Not yet. Instead, I went to the kitchen, made myself strong tea with honey, and sat by the window. Outside, dawn was breaking. The first day of the new year was beginning. My new year. The following days brought a different kind of silence. Not just the absence of noise, but silence filled with meaning. The silence of freedom. I knew their life without my $40,000 in free vacation house was crumbling. I felt nothing about it. I had cut out a tumor. Painfully, without anesthesia, but I had cut it out. A few days later, I heard a car in the driveway. Not their expensive SUV, but the gentle purr of an old sedan. Sophie climbed the porch steps alone, a small backpack over her shoulder. "Grandma," she said simply, "can I stay with you for a while?" She hugged me tightly, and I felt the last ice in my soul begin to thaw. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea. She told me about the chaos at home. Her parents fighting constantly, blaming each other. They'd had to sell their car to cover immediate debts. Their summer vacation was cancelled. "They're panicking," Sophie said, staring into her cup. "Dad keeps saying you stole his inheritance. But he's wrong. This was never his. This was always your life." I took her hand in mine. "No, Sophie, darling," I said quietly. "I'm taking my life back." Over the following weeks, I began making real changes. I wasn't moving, of course. The threat of selling had just been my scalpel for this operation. With the money I no longer sent to Richard, I hired Steve, a quiet, reliable handyman from our village. He fixed the leaking porch roof, repaired the fence, and chopped enough firewood for the entire winter ahead. I paid him fairly, and he did honest work. Then I called my old friend Margaret. We'd been friends since college. She was also widowed, living alone in a cramped city apartment. "Margaret," I said into the phone, "how would you like to move in with me? There's plenty of space, fresh air, room to garden. We could grow old together properly." She was quiet for a moment, then started crying and said yes. A month later, she moved in. The house came alive again, but with a completely different energy. Peaceful, respectful. We cooked together, read books, walked through the snowy garden. I also bought myself something special, a small silver bell with a clear, sweet chime. I placed it on the kitchen table. When Margaret was in the garden and I needed to call her, I rang it gently. It was the sound of a polite request, not the demand for slave labor that the mop had represented. Summer came. The house was surrounded by flowers. Patricia's prize peonies, which she'd never returned to collect, bloomed magnificently as if nothing had happened. But now I tended them for my own joy. One June day, Sophie visited again. We walked through the garden together. I showed her how to properly tie climbing roses, a rare variety I'd managed to cultivate. The air was full of flower fragrance and the humming of bees. On the porch sat a new professional easel with a large canvas, my gift to Sophie for graduating high school. She was painting our garden, and her work was breathtakingly beautiful. That ugly blue mop was long gone. Steve had burned it in the fireplace on his first day. Sophie painted while Margaret dozed in the porch rocking chair. I looked at my blooming, well-tended garden, at my house filled with quiet light and peace. I thought about how my son's cruel gift had actually been a key. He hadn't shown me my place. He had opened the door to the rest of my life. A life where I'm no longer a servant or a function, but the queen of my own quiet, blooming kingdom. And this peace, this happiness-filled silence, became possible only because one New Year's night, I found the strength to take back my own voice. That's the end of Eleanor's story. If it touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and tell me in the comments, have you or someone you know faced similar disrespect? Your thoughts mean everything to me. Subscribe to never miss these powerful stories. Stay strong, value yourself, and live authentically.